Just days away from the AEW debut at Canada Life Centre, Wednesday night, 7 p.m. I know people have been fired up for a few months in the chat, and the time is just about here. And the coolest thing about this, not only do we get some of the best pro wrestlers in the world, some of the best Winnipeg talent that we've ever seen. Jericho, Kenny Omega, and of course, the invisible hand himself, Don Callis, who joins us now on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Don, man, it's great to have you on the program. How are you?
I'm great. Wonderful to be here, and pretty excited to come back to Winnipeg. The Three Kings Day, as they call it. The three biggest names in the history of Winnipeg sports: Don Callis, Kenny Omega, Chris Jericho. You want to talk about a Mount Rushmore of Winnipeg, you could throw Roddy Piper on there as well. But we're very happy to come back here for the first time ever in Winnipeg. Jericho, Omega, and Don by God Callis in the ring at the same time.
Hey, behind the scenes, I mean, this has been a long time coming. And obviously AEW has been around for a couple years now, had that incredible debut. I mean, tons of momentum. We've all been waiting, with so much Winnipeg talent in this company, when we'd see you guys here live. That day is Wednesday. From your perspective, how long has this been in the works, coming? And, for yourself and Chris and Kenny, how personally exciting is it to, get to do what you do in front of what it should be an amazing crowd downtown in your hometown?
Well, one of the great things about working for Tony Khan is all about the fans enjoying the experience. And I think Tony recognized correctly that Winnipeg was a great market to come. I think it's going to be our hottest crowd we've ever had, and AEW has a lot of hot crowds, so that says a lot. For Chris and Kenny and I think it's special because, Kenny Omega's uncle, the Golden Sheik, was one of my original trainers, and he was my first manager in the business when I was a young wrestler. He looked after me, and I have passed on the favor and looked after Kenny, who I've known since he was 10 years old. Kenny and I, as he describes it, are family, if not by blood, then by love and respect. So that's a big deal. And then on the other side of the equation, Chris Jericho and I have been friends since 1990. Been up and down the roads as wrestlers together, whether it was in North America, Japan, Mexico. So for me, it's really cool to kind of be the Bobby Heenan to their Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens. And if you look back, one of the biggest matches, in fact, in the history of wrestling was Jericho Omega at the Tokyo Dome in 2019, and or rather 2018. And that was a group effort between me, Chris, and Kenny. I came up with the idea. I helped to broker the deal with Jericho to get him in there. And the rest is history. And these two guys have kind of been not in each other's lanes for the last while in AEW, but now in Winnipeg for the first time, you're going to have Jericho and Omega in a match together with me out there with Kenny, and I think it's going to be great.
Well, we'll get to the card in a minute. You mentioned Tony Khan. I thought you were going to mention Tony Condello there for a minute. You mentioned a great AWA reference. I mean, your roots in Winnipeg wrestling goes way back, and no one will ever accuse you or either of those other two cats of not paying your dues.
No, I mean, Tony Condello gave me my break in the business, and Tony was great to me. And I would love to get Tony Condello and Tony Khan in a room together. I think that would be great. I'd like to just sit back and listen, because Tony Condello's got great stories, and Tony Khan is a wrestling historian. I mean, he knows everything, so I think it would be very cool. I mean, we came up hard back then, man. It was not easy. A lot of long road trips. A lot of, northern, they used to call them the death tours up in northern Manitoba in the middle of winter. And I think that's one of the ways the business has changed. Back then, a lot of guys, didn't survive those types of experiences. And if you kind of came through that showed you that you were serious about the business.
Well, as I say, I don't think there's a business in entertainment where you have to earn your way up more than pro wrestling, and you've certainly done that. Just before we get to the card, how did you get into it? I remember The Natural. I was finishing high school, and you were doing some indie shows in and around Winnipeg, but it's been incredible. You've had a lot of other things on the go. We always remember you jumping on with Joe Aiello on that wrestling show back on 92, and I know you jumped in the studio there today. But for folks that are unfamiliar, can you just fill us a bit on your path through this business to what should be an incredible night on Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, I got trained in '89, and I was quickly paired with Kenny's uncle, the Sheik, and I kind of did that and, local indie stuff and across Canada till about '94. Then I started going to South Africa, Germany, Puerto Rico, Lebanon, Japan, so kind of became like that international guy. Signed with WWF at the time in 1997. I was there from '97 to '99. Then quickly went to ECW, where I was there until 2001. 2001, I retired, went back to school, got my MBA, and yes, I am the best educated person in pro wrestling with an IQ of 163, and I think that's some sort of record. I went back to school, got my MBA, was involved in international business for 13 years, and then decided it was time to come back to wrestling, and here we are. And I always said the only guy that I would kind of, because I had managed Rhino to an ECW world title, I'd managed Jeff Jarrett to an NWA world title, but I always said the only guy I would come out of retirement as a manager to manage was Kenny Omega, and it worked out. 2 years ago, Kenny Omega and I changed the face of AEW, and we've been together ever since. Now I consult with the Young Bucks as well, as you know, and there's another young star coming into town that I'm very excited about, which is Takeshita. And I am planning to roll out the Winnipeg red carpet, such as it is, for Takeshita when he gets here, and show him exactly what happens when you're in the orbit of the man I like to call myself the King of Winnipeg.
Don Callis is the King of Winnipeg. He'll be there along with all the stars of AEW Wrestling Wednesday at Canada Life Center. Tickets still on sale. Pick them up if you don't have them already. Don, you mentioned Kenny, and obviously that I'm glad you brought up the Jericho Omega match in Japan, because for casual fans that at the time might have only really seen a WWE product on television, there seemed to be a huge growth of independent wrestling and stars that maybe had been in different spots before, but doing it on their own or going over to Japan. And that event, I mean, came on, I think maybe with social media, a lot more people knew it. Between the Winnipeg guys, how big that event was, how important was that in AEW's formation? And from a wrestler's perspective, or a manager's, for guys like that, the opportunity for another elite organization to bring pro wrestling around the world.
It's funny, I've never talked to Tony Khan about it. I mean, let's be clear, without Tony Khan, none of this stuff happens. And he's been, a great boss and a guy who has really created an alternative for wrestling fans that was needed. But I think the Jericho Omega Dome match that I was a part of, what it really did was, I think it showed not just Tony, but maybe a lot of people, that there is an alternative audience here, because that was the biggest match on earth that year, for many, many reasons. And, 40,000 people at the Tokyo Dome and the whole thing, it really helped New Japan as well. But it was like, here's this guy from New Japan, Kenny Omega, and Chris Jericho, who had left WWE and said he would never wrestle anywhere else, who came together for one night in Japan, and all fans got exposed to New Japan. They got exposed to Kenny. They got exposed to this idea of these two guys. It was really a perfect story. And I think, I can't speak for Tony Khan, but if I were him and I were watching that, I'd be like, you know what? Maybe there's something here, and maybe something can be done, and that may have factored in. And I was just happy to be a part of it, because I'm not in this business for, I like wrestling. That's not why I'm here. I am here at this stage after, 30 odd years in the industry and traveled a lot of roads and done a lot of jobs. My interest right now in wrestling is solely to shock people, to change history, and to make things better, and to rewrite the history books. Kenny and Chris and I did it in the Tokyo Dome. Kenny and I did it 2 years ago in AEW, and we're fixing to do it again.
Well, Don, speaking of Kenny Omega, it's amazing because he is such an international star, and I think there's still some people in Winnipeg that may not have been exposed to him. I mean, many people say that he is the best to do it in the business on the planet. For people that aren't familiar with Kenny Omega, tell us about, this product to Winnipeg, and why many people, I'm sure including you, think that he's the best.
Well, I said it on Dynamite this past week. Chris Jericho is in the conversation as the greatest of all time, but in my view, right now, he's only the second best wrestler from Winnipeg. Kenny Omega is a phenomenon. I mean, I I will say, and it's not just because Kenny and I are family, I will say that Kenny Omega is the greatest in-ring performer in the history of professional wrestling. And that's pretty special. When you think you've got someone who is the absolute best in the world at what they do, who grew up in Transcona of all places, and then you've got me, who is the absolute best in the world at what I do, which is manipulate wrestling history, which is make moments that people cry, which means rewriting the wrestling history books. You've got two guys like that, both from Winnipeg, plus Chris Jericho, who's the Madonna, the Michael Jackson of pro wrestling, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's no other city that can talk about that. And I'm happy to be here with you because in the past, Winnipeg, the media hasn't always embraced these stars. Chris Jericho is by far the most well-known name from Winnipeg. Don't talk to me about Neil Young, a Kelvin High School alum, or Ken Finkelman, or Monty Hall, or Burton Cummings. More people know who Chris Jericho is. And for that reason, I think Winnipeg should be rolling out the red carpet. I know the fans are, and I'm happy to be here with you because I think it's good when the media talks about, hey, we got guys here who are the best in the world at what they do, and how many cities can say that?
Well, and we're going to get a chance to see, as you mentioned at the beginning of this interview, Jericho and Omega in the same match. This is going to be insane. A trios championship match with the House of Black, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, the Elite, and Chris Jericho and the Jericho Appreciation Society. Tee this one up for people, what they will see if they get a ticket and come down on Wednesday for what will be, a spectacle without a doubt.
That's going to be, in my opinion, the greatest wrestling match in the history of Winnipeg wrestling. And that covers a lot of ground because I was there for Flair Bockwinkel, you know. So this is going to be the best match, the biggest match ever when Kenny and Chris collide in this match. The House of Black, I'll give them credit. They really kicked the hell out of us at Revolution and took those trios titles. So they're on fire right now. You know, my guys would like to get back in and prove a point. They're going to try to do that in Winnipeg. And, of course, the Jericho Appreciation Society. So I don't ever recall a 9-man, if you want to call it that, 3 trios teams together, certainly not in EC or in AEW. So I'm super excited about that. And actually, I'll say this. I'm almost as excited about something else, and only because, you know, I don't manage him, but MJF and the Rebar Mitzvah, I mean, that's going to be phenomenal. I have no idea what's going to happen. I would love to be a part of it. I don't know what I can do. I need to bring a gift. But and MJF coming off just a phenomenal 60-minute Ironman match with Bryan Danielson. So that's going to be amazing. And then the newly coined AEW International Championship, Orange Cassidy is going to be defending that belt against none other than Jeff Jarrett. So you're going to get to see all of the stars. The Young Bucks are going to be there. And I just want, when Kenny Omega's music hits, I want people to just go crazy. And I think Winnipeg's going to be the best crowd we've ever had, which, as I said earlier, covers a lot of ground when you're talking AEW.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to need to prod the fans to do that. They are ready right now, and we're days away from the event. I'm glad you brought up MJF. He is the AEW World Champion. You've been incredible heel for the majority of your career. MJF is one of the best on the microphone. I just wanted to get your thoughts on this young man and his rise to have the belt right now as the champion right now of AEW.
I think MJF is a phenomenon. I mean, in a different way than Kenny is. I mean, MJF came in much like I did at his age. I was known for my talking. I think MJF, I give him a lot of credit. I think a lot of people were saying before this Iron Man match, well, you know, he's a great talker. He gets good ratings. He looks great. But, you know, can he hang with Bryan Danielson? And I'll tell you, if you watch that match, it wasn't the Bryan Danielson show. I mean, Bryan was phenomenal. But MJF, I think, answered a lot of the quote-unquote critics that wondered. And he delivered what I think was the greatest Iron Man match in the history of wrestling. And that, as you know, covers a lot as a wrestling fan, you know, Brett Shawn. And so this has just been a great thing for the company. And I'm very happy for Max because, you know, Max and I are a little bit similar. We're both people who don't like wrestling fans very much. We don't care for people and we don't suffer fools. So I'm super happy for Max and this Rebar Mitzvah thing. Like, I have no clue, but this might be the biggest celebration since the Jets won the Stanley Cup. Oh, wait, that's never happened and never will. Sorry.
Don Callis is with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk. AEW is on Wednesday. Mention MJF. There's some incredible female talent in AEW as well. Jade Cargill's coming. Open challenge for her TBS championship, calling out all of the Canadian talent north of the border from the women's side. Can anyone beat Jade Cargill? Just fill us in a little bit on her and what fans will see when she brings that incredible winning streak to the peg.
Listen, athletically, I don't think there's any, maybe man or woman, that can match Jade Cargill. She's a special athlete. She's a freak athlete. There's no question. And I think Jade Cargill has taken to the wrestling business very quickly. Now, Jade was a high-level college basketball player, so she understands coaching. She understands what needs to be done. She understands preparation. So do I think there's anyone that can beat her? There's always someone who can beat somebody. And I think Jade Cargill's biggest risk is herself. She talked about getting a little bit bored of mowing down opponents. You can't get bored. You can't lose focus in a company like AEW that has so much female talent in this case. You could lose very quickly. And I worry about Jade. I don't know who she's listening to at this point in terms of getting advice. But if you look at just the physical, and she's very intelligent as well, she may be undefeated for a long time. I may be retired by the time someone beats her. I don't know. I'm planning on sticking around at least for another 30 years, though, so we'll see.
AEW Dynamite is on Wednesday night, the Winnipeg homecoming for Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, our guest Don Callis. What time do you guys get the key to the city on Wednesday before this goes down?
Can I do a little Mean Gene? Ladies and gentlemen, or maybe it's a Joel, I don't know. But it's a Mean Gene. It's, ladies and gentlemen, get your tickets at AEWTix.com at the Canada Life Center. Doors open 5 p.m. Central, showtime, and that's a live Dynamite. On the Ides of March and the birthday of MJF, showtime 6 o'clock. It's going to be the greatest time ever in Winnipeg at a wrestling event. I'm so pumped. I'm so excited. Looking forward to seeing you there and all the fans here in Winnipeg. It's the one day that I may be nice to fans. Don't approach me or make eye contact the other 364 days a year.
Don, you're the best. Cannot wait for Wednesday. Thanks for doing this, and continued success to you, the Winnipeg guys, and everyone at All Elite Wrestling.
Thanks, buddy.